Welcome to the sixth video in this video series of using Godot with C# and the Rider IDE to manipulate a 3D mesh. It has been a while since I've posted anything on this channel, and this has been due to some unforeseen circumstances as far as there was a move happening and there was some medical stuff that came up, so it's been a while since I've been able to work on this channel. My hope is most of that's behind me now, and I'm going to be able to post this channel more regularly again. So I'm going to make this next video here that I'm working on now. I'm going to make this a kind of an easier one to kind of ease me back into this because I haven't done this in a while. And this is going to be more of a correction of a previous video. And maybe correction isn't quite the right word. It's going to be an addition because I noticed something was wrong with the second video in our series when we generated the wireframe. We did something that looked like it worked, and it did work, but it wasn't complete. And it will be easier to just show you what the deal was. So the problem is, and let me go ahead and fire up our game here. So in the second video, if you remember when we were generating the wireframe mesh, we used an ImmediateGeometry node, and we kind of drew the lines around this cube. And you notice that it's black, and in our code we selected black. But the problem is it's not really working here, and I'll explain to you why here in a second. Let me demonstrate the problem and then I'll show the solution. So if we go to Rider, and if we remember what we did here with the ImmediateGeometry, remember we set the color here to black. Let's go ahead and set it to yellow. And then let's rebuild the Godot game, and we would expect the mesh to be yellow, but it's not going to be. And you notice that it's not. And the reason for that is, and I had to do a bit of research here, is the ImmediateGeometry, right now it's not running with any material, so it's kind of defaulting to some values, and we really want to set some values here that will allow us to do what we want here. And I'll demonstrate, or I'll show you a spatial material. I'll use the green cubes spatial material since we have it readily available, and I'll show you the settings we're going to have to set up for the ImmediateGeometry. So if we go into the material for the cube and we take a look at it, there's a bunch of things here. Now there's two things we're going to care about. One is this flag that's for unshaded. By default it's off on spatial materials, and we're going to want that on, not for the cube, but for our ImmediateGeometry. I just wanted to show you in the interface here, since we have a material, that's one of the settings we're going to have to set. And then the other one we're going to want is vertex color. And there's this use as albedo, and we're going to want to turn that on because by default it's off. So this is for the cube spatial material. This is not what we want for the ImmediateGeometry, but I just wanted to demonstrate this is what material settings we're going to have to change after we attach a material to the ImmediateGeometry. So let's go ahead and let's go into Rider. And let's go ahead right after we instantiate the ImmediateGeometry. Let's create a spatial material. And we'll just instantiate a new one. And right now let's not do anything super different other than make sure we apply the material just to keep apples to apples, and we'll start adding things. So the way you would apply this empty material that we just made, or this, I mean not empty, but this default material, is you would go to the ImmediateGeometry and you would go material override, and it equals the spatial material. So this shouldn't do anything different other than making sure that we now have a material on there that we can change. So let's go back to Godot and let's play the game, and we should notice nothing's changed since I last ran the game. And it hasn't. You notice we're still getting that black lines even though we said yellow, so that's not helping us any. So one of the two settings that we need now, let's go back to Rider. So what we want to do here is we want to go to the spatial material, and we want to set that unshaded flag like I showed before. And let's just do that one first. So we'll do this one at a time. So let's go back to Godot. Let's hit the play button. And you'll notice that the mesh is no longer black, but it's not yellow either, it's white. But that's an improvement, at least it's a color other than black. So that's a good first step. So then the next step here, let's go back to Rider, is now we want to set that other flag. We want to say to use the vertex color as albedo. So what we want to do here is we want to set the vertex color as albedo to true. And now when we run the game, we should see yellow. So let's go back to Godot, run the game. And hopefully you can see that it's yellow. So now it's accepting the color correctly. And I figured a way to kind of reinforce this is, what if we go ahead and we, you know how in 3D applications, Godot kind of has it. You know, like when you have a object, well, you can see it with the axes here. You know how we have a red X, a green Y, and a blue Z line that kind of demonstrates the axes? Well, what if in our game we do the same thing, but we use immediate mode geometry and we change the colors, red, green, and blue, to kind of draw at least the positive X directions. So that's actually not too bad to do if we remember what we did, we just did. So let's go back to Rider, and let's go to the end of the ready. Oh, I think that was the end of the ready. Yes, it's the end of the ready. Okay, so let's just do this at the very end, right before we exit the method. So we're going to want a new immediate geometry node. We'll call this access immediate geometry. Oops. And I don't want that variable. I want the type of immediate geometry. There we go. And I want the object. There we go. Okie doke. So then we want to make sure that we set those materials. We don't want to use the same, we could use the same spatial, but we're going to change some property here in a minute. But let's, because I like cheating, let's go ahead and let's actually cheat that far. And then we'll change some stuff, because copy paste is our friend. All right, so let's call this access spatial material. Spatial material, axis, and axis. Now the reason we had to give this a different name is because we're in the same method up here where we were setting when we were drawing the wire mesh over the cube, and we already have something called immediate geometry and spatial material, so we had to call it something different because we really don't want to reuse that same immediate geometry. So let's go ahead and we'll begin. We will draw lines just like we were doing before. And then let's end. And now we want this attached. Let's go back to Godot here. The script itself is sitting on main. So let's just go ahead and put the immediate geometry when the game's running just right under as a child of main. And since the script is already on main, we are main. So all we have to do is just add a child. We don't have to reference an object. We are that object. So we can just do an add child, and we can add the axis immediate geometry. Because before, remember, with the cube, when we were drawing the mesh up here for the cube, we had to get the cube mesh instance, then add the child, because we needed to. Let's go back to Godot. We needed to. We were making it a child of this cube. But for the immediate geometry for the axes we're getting ready to do, we're just going to make it a child of main. So we are main because the script is on main. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so let's go back down to our code here. So we have the basis here to begin drawing things. So we probably don't want to set the color here. So we're going to do it in the begin. So first we want to draw the x-axis. Well, the x-axis we want red, right? So let's make it red. And then we want to draw, and if you remember from when we were drawing the wire mesh, you give it the starting, since we're in line mode, oops, we got two begins here. All right. Since we're in line mode, we give it the starting, the A and the B to draw between. So since we're drawing the x-axis, the from is going to be 0. So let's just make a new vector, and let's just make it at 0, 0, 0. And then we're going to draw it to, and we want to draw it to, let's just say x1. Now, I don't want to hard code, let's say if we wanted it 10 long, I don't want to hard code it in here in case we want to change it and we're like, oh, maybe 10 units for that axis isn't big enough. So what we probably want to do here is let's just make a constant, and we'll call it, I don't know, axis length maybe, sure. And that way we can just times this by axis length. So since we're making it a 1 and then we're giving it 10, it'll be 10 long. Okay, so why don't we run this and see what happens? We should get a red line going from 0 to plus 10. So let's go to Godot. Let's hit the play button. And you can see that there. It's kind of blending in a bit, but you can see there's a red line there. So let's now do the green so it goes up, and then the blue so it goes Z. So let's go back to Rider. And since we have this code already, actually let's put the red right next to there. That way I can cheat and grab this, and Y, and Z. And we want Y to be green, and we want that to be in the Y direction. So you can see 0, 1, 0. And then Z, we want blue, and so we will put that in the Z direction. Okay, so let's run the game now, and we should get the 3 axes. There should be something still missing here though, but I will demonstrate it here when the game comes up. Okay, so the good news is you can see the red axis for X here, Y is going up, and the Z axis. Let me rotate it a bit so you can see. But you notice that it's not going through the plane here. So like we're seeing these lines, but we're not seeing them like all the way to the center of the world. And that's because obviously the plane material is covering up the axes. And there might be a time where we want this. Maybe we don't want the axes to go through the plane all the way to the center, the origin. But in this case, I do want to do that just because I want to demonstrate another material property. So let's go back to our cube material. Not that we're going to change the cube material, but again, just to demonstrate the thing we want to change. And let me see if I can find this. No. Yeah. So under the flags, there's this no depth test. And you see the hint here. It says, if true, depth testing is disabled and the object will be drawn in render order. So if we draw the axes last, which is what we are doing because we put it at the end of the ready method, it should draw over the material that's already there. So we do have to set this flag on the immediate geometry. And that's also why I didn't want to reuse the spatial material for the cube, because if we would have set that for the cube, those triangles would have been all messed up that we were drawing, because whatever got drawn last would be on top, and that may or may not be what we want, so it would look kind of goofy. So that's why we wanted a separate spatial material for that. Okay, so we want to set the no depth test. So let's for the immediate geometry material. So let's go back to Rider, and let's set it here. So we want to do the axis spatial material, and we want to grab the flag no depth test, and we want to make that equal to true. And that should be it. So now if we go back to Godot and we hit the play button, we should have those axes and they should go all the way to the center. And we don't. Let me look here what I did wrong. I was expecting that to work. All right, so we got the true, flags, no depth test equals true. Huh, that should have worked. It worked earlier. Flags unshaded equals true. Vertex color as albedo equals true. Flags no depth test equals true. That should have worked. It's odd it didn't. Alrighty. Let me stare at this for a minute. I must be missing something. Oh, now see, here's where I made the mistake. So I made the copy paste here, right? And remember I mentioned that up here there's an immediate geometry and a spatial material, and we don't. The spatial material just has these. Well, down here we changed everything to axis, right? Well, not this. Axis immediate geometry material override. Now I'm still using the old spatial material, so that's why it didn't reflect the changes. All right, so now I would expect this to work. So let's go back to Godot. Let's run the game. And now we should see the lines going to the origin. And we do. And you may or may not want this. I mean, that Y coming out of the cube can be kind of annoying, I guess. It depends on what you're looking for. But the reason that I had to cover this, especially the yellow mesh here, is I was doing some experimenting, which is probably going to be my next video, where as you're clicking on this cube and you're clicking on a triangle, it's going to highlight the triangle face that you clicked on in a different color, like orange or blue, or probably not blue, but orange or something else that's not on the screen here. And as I was working on that piece, I'm like, well, everything's black. Like, I didn't think my code was working, and then I realized that that black that initially was here was a coincidence, because it basically was, because it didn't have a useful material. It was just, the material was nothing. It was just black. I mean, it was, I'm assuming it's some default, but I mean, it wasn't doing much of anything, just a black blob. So then when you turned on the unshaded piece, at least it was not taking light calculation into effect, so it was showing itself. But as you remember in the early part of this video, it was white. So then you had to tell it to use the vertex colors as albedo, and then it gave us a proper color. So the next video on this channel is going to be having you, when you click on a triangle on this cube, it's going to highlight that triangle in orange or something. And that's actually a little bit more difficult than you would anticipate. At least it was for me. But once I figured it out, it's actually not too bad once you know how to do this. It's specifically with computing surface normals and making sure you understand which way is forward and which way is back, or which way is, Godot is a right-handed coordinate system, so you need to know which way front is supposed to be on a face, and that's where I was having some issues figuring this out, because I was getting stuff to render, but like the normals were pointing in the other direction. I know this doesn't make sense right now unless you actually know this material before I'm presenting it, but in the next video I'll go ahead and explain it. It's going to be covering a bit of vector math, specifically cross products, but actually dot products too, because we have to compute the angle of when we click versus the face normal to see if this is, the intersection point is actually a face that's facing us, and if it's within a certain angle, because like, if you're like this, that surface normal is going to be like 90 degrees, and so if I try to click on that like here, and as I'm iterating through the mesh, I don't want that 90-degree face selected, because it may be the first thing that's iterated through. I want the one that's facing me. And again, doesn't make a lot of sense right now, but our next video will cover that. So I think I'm going to stop the video here. I think we actually accomplished something interesting here. We have the cube wire mesh, we colored it a certain color. So now the coloring works. And we didn't really need the axes thing. I mean, these aren't necessary, but as I was testing to make sure colors worked, I figured, well, why not draw those? I mean, we can shut those off if they get annoying, but I just thought for right now, I thought they'd be kind of cool. So we went ahead and added them. So as I said, I'm going to end the video here, and I'm hoping to get my next video up. Hopefully it doesn't take like 6 months or whatever. I don't know how long it's been since last I posted the last video. It should be sooner than that because I actually have the solution figured out. I just have to have time to record the video. So I'm hoping that won't take quite that long. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you next time. Take care.